Salut! Today we're going to learn how to use all of those classroom items that you took notes on for last class and put them into sentences to actually use them to describe what is and what is not in the classroom. So first things first, we're going to kind of do this in a question-answer format. The idea being that if somebody asks you, is there one of these in your classroom, you can answer. So the first thing you need to know is how to ask about what's in the classroom, or know what we're asking whenever we ask you what's in the classroom. One of the ways of doing that is just to ask, is there this item in the classroom? And the way you do that in French is you use the phrase il y a. Il y a is this three-word phrase over here, even though it doesn't look like three words, it's just four letters. Il y a is a phrase that you'll use a lot this year. It means there is or there are. If you put it in a question, then it means is there or are there, but it's the same kind of idea. So you can ask about any item, and you can say il y a, then you'll say the name of the item, dans la salle de classe, which means is there whatever that item in the classroom. A quick example just to show you how this works with an actual item filled in. You could ask, il y a des chaises dans la salle de classe? And you would be asking, are there chairs in the classroom? Just filling in the word chaise there to kind of complete the sentence. So here are some two ways to respond to that question. If somebody asks, il y a des chaises dans la classe? Are there chairs in the classroom? You're going to either say that yes there are or no there aren't. So two different ways of responding based on whether the item they ask you about is actually in your classroom. First thing you need to know about the first phrase is that the word oui, which is spelled O-U-I in French, means yes. So oui il y a means yes there are or there is whatever that item is. You'll have to fill it in. So the example I'm giving you here as the answer to the question from the previous slide, oui il y a des chaises. Yes, there are some chairs. Don't forget, I'm pausing there so you can go ahead and practice speaking some French and repeat after me. If by chance they ask you about something that is not in the classroom, then you'll need to make sure that you say no, there are not any of that item. The way you say that in French is by saying non, which by the way looks like non, but it's a French word for no. And you would follow that up with there are not any of that item. Now notice how there is versus there are not is different. You'll notice it still has an il y a, but it's divided up. It's got two magical words in it, and these are the words ne and pas. I call them magical words in the French language because they can take any sentence or any phrase and turn it negative. Instead of there is, it becomes there is not. So it's kind of different than English in that in English you just have to use one word, the word not. In French it actually requires two words. It's the word ne and pas. And you're going to see them a lot this year. For every item that you learn how to say, you'll probably learn how to say the opposite of that. For example, instead of I like, I do not like. Instead of I go, I do not go. So that ne pas is going to come in handy a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and point it out today and kind of keep your eyes peeled for it. For today's phrase, though, we're using it in the phrase of there are not any of that item, and that phrase is non, il n'y a pas de, and then you just fill in the item. So in this case, I actually talked about there not being a TV in our classroom, because there's not a TV in our classroom. So non, il n'y a pas de télé means no, there is not a TV. Please notice that all of these have a place where you actually have to fill in the name of the item. This is something that a lot of my French 1 students are bad about, is that they just copy the stuff in their notes, and then when they go to use them, they go ahead and leave this blank in there. You can't leave it blank. You actually have to fill something in for the sentence to make sense. So what if you want to get a more specific question going on? What if you don't want to just know if there's chairs in the class, but you want to know how many chairs there are? Maybe you're planning on having a certain number of people in the room. This is a more specific question just than whether or not there is or there are not certain items in the class. It's the word how many items are there in the class. So this word here, this combien word, the C word, is the French word for how many or how much. So if you ask combien de a certain item, il y a dans la classe, you're asking how many of that item is there or are there in the classroom. So let's go back to our chair question again. If you wanted to say specifically how many chairs are there in the classroom, you would say combien de chaises il y a dans la classe. And again, that would mean how many chairs are there in the classroom. So once again, if you have a question, you need to have some options for answers. If you want to respond by saying exactly how many chairs there are in a classroom, you're going to use the phrase il y en a. This on here is actually like the words of them in English, and you'll have to fill in a number. So you're not just saying, you could technically say, il y a 31 chaises. There are 31 chairs. But if by chance you want to kind of talk how you speak in English and you don't want to use the word chairs again, then you'll actually take the time to fill in il y en a, and you'll have there are however many of them. That way you don't have to repeat the word chaise. So to give you a quick example, in my particular classroom, there happens to be 31 chairs. So if I want to say there are 31 of them, I will say il y en a 31. And if by chance there are not any of the particular item that they're asking about, then you will go ahead and say there are not any of that item, and you'll say il n'y en a pas. Notice again, it's not just il n'y a pas de, there aren't any. You could say il n'y a pas de chaises, there are not any chairs, or for this question, there are not any windows, il n'y a pas de fenêtre. But if you don't have to repeat the word chairs or the word fenêtre, you can use that word on again, on standing in for the words of them. Il n'y en a pas, there are not any of them. So I give you the example of if somebody says, hey, combien de fenêtres il y a dans la classe? How many windows are in the class? You could say des fenêtres, windows. Il n'y en a pas, there are not any of them. Last page here. You can go ahead and fill in some answers to your practice questions. Again, you'll have some very similar questions later on in class when you have to get to your daily video quiz. First thing you'll need to do is be able to read one of these sentences and know what they mean and know whether it's true or false. So the phrase il n'y a pas de porte dans la classe means there is not a door in the classroom, and obviously that's false. And then again, you need to be able to read and know what these mean. So go ahead, and some of these will be translate questions. Things like il y en a six means there are 6 of them. Go ahead and make sure that if you need to repeat anything, you go ahead and rewind the video. Otherwise, we'll see you in class.